Don't forget, and might I say never forget, to always use code Bricky for 10% off your order at gamersupps.com/Bricky. Space Marine 2 is one of the most anticipated games of the year for a large number of people around me. Not only is this because I make Warhammer content and collect little model toys that make the pew pew noises and roll ones when I need sixes, but also because it is one of the most high-profile sequels of the last few years I've seen. Space Marine 1 is a third-person action game from 2011. The humorous part of Space Marine is that it's genuinely a rather unremarkable title to the majority of people. It's a relatively generic third-person shooter / melee hybrid game that took a little over 5 hours to beat and had all of the hallmarks of a military shooter of that era. Mediocre overall narrative, relatively gray or tan atmosphere, mostly forgettable characters, and an over-reliance on QuickTime events. It was a 6 out of 10 at best, a perfectly serviceable game with some above-average moments, but overall nothing extremely exciting outside of the satisfaction of beating orcs to a pulp and the hilarity of the side villain.
Space Marine! You try to steal my titans? Steal my loot? I'll rip your guts right out your throat!
And a decently in-depth PvP mode. But that's to a layperson. To a Warhammer fan, it's one of the few times their beloved franchise has graced mainstream eyes. One of the only times the Warhammer 40,000 setting had been adapted into something for the modern day, the modern gamer, not another strategy game this time, a real get with the times level of product. Characters like Titus and Leandros were not subpar soldiermen saying soldiermen things, they're important now, turning into various memes in the fandom and creating what I consider one of the largest examples of rose-tinted power armor in quite some time. 13 years later, and Warhammer as a product has grown substantially. Already on the up and up for a bit, the COVID-19 pandemic locked everyone indoors and forced them to put down the work clothes and pick up the paintbrush. Along with releases of newer, better editions of the tabletop game, higher quality miniatures, and some new mainline games, Warhammer 40K was truly on the rise to being a mainstream name outside of just the United Kingdom. With the success of multiple Warhammer titles such as Mechanicus, Darktide, Boltgun, and Rogue Trader, it was clear that the people hungered for more digestible, wide appeal 40K titles, and it just so happened that a certain one from 2011 decided to end on a cliffhanger, ready to be picked back up. Captain Titus, accused of chaos, corruption, and heresy at the end of Space Marine 1, returns 13 years later with a new game, a new coat of paint, and a demotion in Space Marine 2, developed by Saber Interactive and published by Focus Entertainment.
What is your reward?
My salvation is my reward.
What is your craft?
My craft is death.
What is your pledge?
My pledge is eternal service.
Now, some backstory. I am what one would like to call a small Warhammer fan. I dabble a little bit.
He can only get so erect, chat.
And this dabbling has brought me to a lot of aspects of the hobby, and with the exception of the laughable Warhammer Plus subscription service, I tend to engage with all of it, be they books, games, and the tabletop. This has made me grow into a strange combination of excited and jaded at the same time. Warhammer, much like Star Wars, is a collection of fantastic things, mediocre things, and terrible things all under the same label. Where they differ is that Star Wars, at least lately, has a significantly larger percentage in the mediocre things category, where Warhammer feels like it is spread amongst all three evenly. It is 33% pure cinema, bland padding and absolute horseshit. Engaging with the media, engaging with the universe is not about enjoying its aspects as a whole, but rather finding the things you individually love and putting your time and effort into that. You may find nothing appealing about the Tyranids, giant bugs from outer space, and the main villain of Space Marine 2, but the undead Egyptian skeleton Necrons might be far more engaging. The Ultramarines, protagonists of this title, to me are relatively boring outside of a few of their named characters, yet my favorite Space Marine Legion are murdering psychopaths who flay people alive for fun. So what that says about me, I don't know. The reason for this whole tangent is that while I am often excited for new Warhammer games, I am also rather critical of them, possibly even more so than I am of other products. Because I care so much about this universe and those that participate in it, I want it to be a good representation of what we can put out. This is why I don't prescribe to the recent consensus that Space Marine 1 is an underrated gem from the past. I think it's perfectly fine and doesn't go much past that. I was really hoping Space Marine 2 would be that gem, would be what Space Marine 1 could have been given more time and not being 13 years ago. Was I right? Kind of? So let's talk campaign. In Space Marine 2, you play as Lieutenant Titus, demoted after the accusation from Leandros and here to stop a Tyranid invasion. The Tyranids are a hive mind of extremely genetically adaptive bugs who basically turn all forms of biomass into more of them. They're pretty insane and often considered one of, if not the biggest threat to all sentient life in the galaxy. So, you know, stop them from eating the entire planet. And the intro of this game is, in my opinion, the best part. You play as a nameless Deathwatch soldier after an excellent opening cutscene where you crash down below and are slowly taught how to shoot, fight, parry, dodge, and all the rest, while your kill team is slowly killed piecemeal as you are unable to message them due to a damaged Vox. This whole part culminates in a reveal where right after you send your bioweapon to halt the Tyranid advance, it's revealed that this nameless Deathwatch soldier is actually Captain Titus. Holy pog, add the soy jack pointing image to the screen. That is before you get impaled by a Carnifex and are murdered, but miraculously live by crossing the Rubicon Primaris and becoming Primaris Lieutenant Titus. That's right, baby. We knew Games Workshop had another Primaris Lieutenant for us, and it's T-Man himself. You are inducted back into the Ultramarines on shaky ground, and off you go to murder Xenos filth in the name of the God Emperor. Now, this is where people might tend to diverge on opinions a bit. Space Marine 2 is a 2010s shooter through and through, and what that means for you can vary. When I think of a 2010s shooter, I think the same thing I discussed prior. Gray and tan, grunting dudes in armor, bad characterization, and worse story, but with tons of shooty bang bang. Others see it as a straightforward turn your brain off level of action with set pieces and window dressing to enjoy as they play. For them, the lack of any kind of overarching narrative is not a bad thing, it's half the point. I can't deny when I say that I was hoping for a little more from the narrative of this game, but I think it stings twice as much due to the promise I was seeing at certain parts of it. Now, for starters, the gameplay of Space Marine 2 is incredibly fun, genuinely a great time to mess around with. It plays more like God of War than it does a third-person shooter. You do plenty of gun combat, but the melee has light combos that you throw around, and then you parry when you see a blue light or dodge when you see a red light. Then an enemy is wounded enough to be executed, which helps you regenerate armor or health if you have recently lost some. And it just helps that the game is an absolutely gory spectacle. Just pure blood splatters everywhere and bugs being ripped apart limb from limb, one after the other. It truly is glorious, and it better be glorious because that's all you are going to be doing for the 8 or so hours this campaign lasts. During that time, Titus will begrudgingly be given orders from his Scottish-ass captain while his two subordinates question his actions throughout the campaign. I say this so matter of fact because that really is a massive amount of what the campaign has to offer. You and your squad get an order order from your captain. You go down to eradicate the Tyranid infestation. You do exactly that while saying the famous Ultramarine lines such as death to the Xenos, or for Gilliman, or courage and honor, or die heretic. Then you return back to the battle barge, get more orders, and do it again. That, for the most part, is the entire purpose of the campaign. It's a COD campaign from 2010. Big, gruff, shoot man, McGrungy dude are given orders, execute them, return for more orders, and then repeat. And you're probably asking, well, what's wrong with that? Hell, these COD games from back when were relatively loved at the time, and to that I say, not really. Often they were considered the weakest parts of their package, but even with that being said, they did have set pieces that made it a bit more enjoyable overall. What Space Marine 2 is missing is both the story and characterization as well as the set pieces, and that is where I think it truly misses its part. Gameplay set pieces, not visual ones. That's all beautiful, but the actual meat, the player part. Set pieces are easier to discuss because they are gameplay related. As mentioned before, a majority of the campaign will be the usual shoot, stab, and murder of Xenos, but what it misses out on is any change in the formula to mix it up and keep each individual mission fresh. In the campaign, there is absolutely zero progression of any kind. You don't earn experience, you don't earn armor upgrades, you don't earn cosmetics, you simply play as Titus, and that is that, unless you are co-op and then you play as his other two squad mates as well. Now, normally, when the game throws you into a set piece, it strips you of all of your upgrades, and it's a bit annoying. But because that doesn't exist, there is a profoundly lacking amount of cool shit to do in each mission. My mind races directly back to Titanfall 2, one of the best shooter campaigns of all time, and vividly remembering every single story mission having some kind of cool gimmick. Getting separated from BT in the sewers, the apartment home fabricator map with all the verticality, affecting causes time travel, and the Seer escape kit. There is always a cool reason why they all felt different. And if you want a similar example back in the time frame of Space Marine 1, hell, even something like Modern Warfare 2 from 2009 is a good one. Turret sections on the Humvees, snowmobile chase scenes, two factions fighting each other as Crossfire, defending the Burger Town, AC-130 segments, all of this stuff. It's all stuff to break up the usual moment-to-moment gameplay, and Space Marine 2 has almost none of this except for 3 parts I can actually remember. The first is you get a Pyroblast and you burn a bunch of Ripper swarms into a room and push them out from surrounding you. That part's fine, it's a bit of novelty, but the really fun moment, probably the best in the game, is when you are falling from space across a bunch of destroyed ships, and that genuinely felt incredibly badass. All you're doing is moving yourself out of the way of stuff, but just seeing that was such an awesome breakup from all the other kinds of gameplay going on. There's also a bit near the end when you hold your company standard and fire at a bunch of enemies with a pistol, which is kind of decent, but other than that, there is genuinely so little to break up the same gameplay loop over and over again, which I wouldn't mind if there was customization or progression to keep it interesting, but it doesn't have that, and it wears very thin over the course of the game's runtime. Which, hey, I mean, we can forgive, right? If the story and people we are playing are a bit better, and here I'm a bit more mixed. I do think gameplay-wise it overstates its welcome, but the gameplay is so good that even while that does happen, it isn't the worst thing ever. But what gets me here is just general wasted opportunity. Like, Space Marines are often seen as boring characters, and for damn good reason. It's hard to make a compelling character when their personality boils down to murder everything that isn't me, and then meditate on how you can do it better. Hard to make that interesting. Or so I had thought. Right after playing my first campaign run through, I read Horus Rising, the first of the Horus Heresy trilogy that I, despite reading over 30 40K novels, never got around until now. And let me just say, Garvia Loken is a badass motherfucker who is the most interesting son of a bitch in power armor I've read in a hot minute. Turns out, you absolutely can make incredibly interesting Space Marines so long as you have the right writer and Dan Abnett was the guy for the job. Titus has promise, and his relation with his squad mates also has promise, and occasionally you'll see a cutscene and go, oh damn, maybe they got it in them.
I must apologize for my actions on Abrams.
Not necessary.
I fell prey to suspicion. Almost killed you.
When I was a young captain, one of my men questioned my motives, brushed his concerns aside, and I paid the price. Your suspicions arose because I failed to answer your doubts, as I failed to answer his.
Stand by for suborbital drop.
I'm honored to fight beside you both.
As are we, brother.
You grew up on Calth. Let's say we settle some of that debt today.
Aye, sir.
But for each of those, there is another cutscene of the usual fanfare and things just move ahead. Plus, just in general, the campaign's pacing isn't great. A lot of it feels rushed. Example, you meet another faceless ultramarine in your campaign, and one of your squad mates ensures you he is the bee's knees, or the emperor's skeletal knees. You fight with them for a bit, and then this cutscene plays out.
The enemy infiltrated the dome.
No, my lord.
What about the Temple of Thasian?
The dome was evacuated days ago.
Rejoin the main force immediately.
Our orders are to remain here.
On whose authority?
Captain Fairburn. We are to hold this position until further notice.
The dome is empty. Now move on.
But, sire...
I gave you an order.
Forgive me, my lord. Perhaps there was a communication error. The captain insisted.
The deserters.
No. We have our orders.
Vox your captain. If you are deserters, I'll execute you myself.
Captain Fairburn, come in. Captain Fairburn, come in.
Ambush. Kill them.
So this whole scene illustrates how I feel about the campaign. The first half of the cutscene, genuinely good, tense, interesting, good camera work, intriguing, awesome. Second half, dude, we just met this guy, this mission, and he dies as a throwaway character. Then the Rubric Marines arrive, say absolutely nothing, and you just begin combat. Like, I gotta say, the Thousand Sons need more fanfare than just showing up like this. These are the Thousand Sons. The Ultramarines might be the main character, but the Thousand Sons are, sorry, way more interesting and have way better lore. We should have had a sorcerer with them shouting obscenities at Titus and crew, or watch them do some fucked up warp shit to people to really nail down how much of a threat they are. The entire opening mission was to establish how unstoppable the Tyranid force is, including a final last stand and Titus's entire squad and even himself technically dying. The Thousand Sons just show up, mog you, and then you kill them. You don't get any proper introduction until Imura about halfway through the game, and even he comes out of nowhere with zero character setup, which blows because Imura is like kind of a Chad. If they had a secret agenda to make me join Tzeentch instead of the Ultramarines, bitch, they succeeded, because even though he had little to no setup, every time that crazed sorcerer talked, I loved hearing it. love this dude. His actor owed rent, and his performance gave me all the ham that someone like Palpatine would give me. In fact, for the most part, there are a few random performances that worked out super well, and none of them were from the main cast. Like, listen to this dude on the Baneblade.
You will give your life in the name of our holy emperor! Sir, yes, sir! Will you give your life in the name of all that is good and pure? In the name of our holy emperor? Sir, yes, sir! Then take up the Cadian standard and hold it high so that the enemy will know the name of their executioners!
That's Baneblade Bill. I really like Baneblade Bill. There's also Dreadnought Dave. Now watch him throw a statue and hit a Helldrake in the face.
God's abomination is mine! I cast you down!
Holy terror.
What a baller Dave is. It sucks he died and is now trapped in an eternal robot coffin. There's also some just missed stuff at the end I thought we were going to get but didn't. You enter a Necron tomb complex down below, which plays into the importance of the black stone used to either amplify or negate the warp, something that I knew about because of my knowledge of 40K, but I feel like people will be very lost on when they see it in the game. But you know, I kind of thought I'd get the chance to fight a few Necrons. I got really giddy when I saw it, but it was just window dressing for the missions and nothing more. I didn't really need like a whole new faction, but a couple enemies here and there would have been kind of fun. Would have been a great reveal, like how do they keep this under wraps the whole time? The last hour of the game just goes off the rails. You get another soy jack pointing moment where Marnius motherfucking Calgar shows up and the whole theater claps.
I clapped when I saw it.
He spends about 5 minutes on screen shouting orders, and then when the company assaults a demon Lord of Change, this happens. This is so fucking funny to me. This Lord of Change, you know, greater demon of Tzeentch, freezes everyone in time or whatever, except us because we hide behind a tank. I guess nobody else hid behind anything. Then Marnius Calgar passes an Ultra Kidney Stone and says, nah, fuck you, I'd win. And without reinforcements, walks headfirst into what is presumed to be a goddamn warp portal. A portal into the warp. The Immaterium.
Is this the Immaterium?
If it is, we must move quickly.
To where?
No. Don't pass go. Don't collect your corpse starch. The fuck you mean the warp? Ain't no way you in the warp, because so far your video game has been very faithful to the source material and very accurate to almost every single part of the Warhammer universe. The only person who braves the warp is Caldor Tangerine Drago, and he is an insane person who eats suns, and that we all agree is stupid that he can even survive in the warp. But this, I mean, it has to be some kind of Tzeentch bullshittery, right? Because if it was truly the warp, we would all be atomic dust in seconds. It's one of those types of jump the shark moments that even if you aren't a massive fan of Warhammer, you can look at that and be like, that's not right. There's no way that's right. In fact, it's so not right that I'm almost more keen on the idea that it's supposed to be some kind of Tzeentch shenanigans, and in a way they could write themselves out of it that way, but I can't imagine someone taking the IP of Warhammer and doing a bungle that badly. Despite fight this, you fight a genuinely pretty good boss fight, actually, against Imura and the Lord of Change. Actually quite fun. You break the MacGuffin through sheer force of manly screaming, and, well, you escape. The end of the game does feel super rushed as Imura dies, but you know, she could never really tell. And then you come back to get promoted and get a stern talking to from the chaplain, who...
I will show no mercy. Leandros.
Oh man, I am 2 scenes in and I'm calling something right now. I don't want to spoil anybody, so don't tell me one way or the other. The fucking chaplain, who is like super weird in the opening scene, is going to be the traitor from the first game.
Leandros?
Yeah.
Soy Jack pointing moment, let's go! Much like Brad, this is also something I called almost immediately at the beginning, but I suppose it's still kind of cool to have that reference, and also Leandros would absolutely become a chaplain with how uptight he is.
Abomination.
But the campaign ends very open-ended with a clear and obvious tease for a sequel and what comes next. I know I'm bitching a lot for this serviceable 6 out of 10 campaign, but that 6 out of 10 comes almost entirely from how good the gameplay sections are, because it is a bloody, gory, delicious mess. If it was anything other than Ultramarines, I bet it would be more interesting, but there's just so many damn odd choices in this game. Why is Calgar here? He arrives for 10 minutes and then needs rescuing. It's purely a fan service moment, and I don't think a good one. What happened to the Nids? Where did they go? What happened? We didn't stop the invasion at all. They're still here. We just forget about them for the 1,000 Suns instead. Halfway through the game, we just kind of say, we'll deal with that later, and they never come back to it. Who the hell was Imura? Apparently, there's like a tiny bit of him in a book somewhere, but I mean, I've read a lot of 40K books, and I haven't heard about this guy. And why was he not given any backstory in the game for people who didn't read that specific book, or even mentioned earlier? You know, normally in a story, you establish the villain early on, and you kind of proliferate them through the story a bit to keep it interesting. What was up with generic Marine dude number 2's angry rampage? It was never brought up again. He had a whole Born on Calth bit, which is genuinely interesting because Calth happened 10,000 years ago, and a lot of Primaris Marines are in stasis for 10,000 years. So this dude was born in like the Heresy. He was a kid during the Horus Heresy and then just was stasisified for the rest of the time. Like, that's fascinating. It's never brought up. Wait, hold on. Why did Titus have like weird, strange brain shittery when he saw the 1,000 Suns runes when they killed the Magos way in the beginning and pass out? And then they never brought that up again. Wait, what happened to him? Was it like effect from old chaos crap? Was there something clouding his mind? Why did he pass out? Was it just to provide more suspicion for Gadriel to try to kill him later on? He just knocks out and it's never brought up again. If it's a chaos inflicted thing, why did it never happen to him later? What was that? The seeds were sown for some really cool stuff. There genuinely could have been a lot of awesome characterization, but it just falls flat. It's set up with little to no payoff and an excuse to go from place to place and murder the shit out of it. And hey, murdering the shit out of it is great, but it doesn't make a great narrative. And I know, Warhammer fans are never happy, I get it, but even if I wasn't a fan of the source material, it still just isn't it. The dialogue, the pacing, all of it. You will play it one time and never again, unless you're going for some hard mode achievement or something, and considering that there is no experience or progression for playing the campaign, I don't know why you'd bother. Also, just a side note, this is not a negative, it's just kind of a thing that would have been cool. You get the golden laurels on the end of the campaign for your helmet. Wouldn't it have been kind of neat if like the title screen helmet, once you beat the campaign, also had the golden laurels on it? It would have been cool. Small touch. It would have been kind of sweet. One thing that has become particularly fascinating with discussion around the campaign is the disconnect I've noticed between opinions on it. In the beginning, it seemed like most people I spoke to, most with review codes, most other 40K lore fans like myself, like the other members of my podcast and friends of the podcast, all agreed that the campaign had some pretty fun moments, but the narrative and characterization was lacking. It was almost a unanimous agreement that it was a bit lackluster, but still fun to play through. But then the game came out and general audiences seemed to be completely separate on the overall feelings of the campaign. And that is something that I feel is more interesting to talk about than debating the actual merit of the campaign itself. Why is there that disconnect? Could it be that because knowing 40K lore is basically a job, I've been exposed to so much of it, and therefore something of this caliber isn't particularly impressive to me anymore? Is it the fact that it's not just the excitement of getting a high quality 40K game, which is what most people wanted in general, regardless of the strength of its story? Where is that disconnect present? And I guess why is it there is a question that I find far more interesting than, you know, whether or not Titus is a good character or something like that. Now that I have thoroughly made you assume that I despise this game, let's bring us back into something more positive. The mode I originally thought you would be playing the most, the co-op missions. So, co-op is comprised of 6 missions in total at time of recording, and some on their way afterwards. This is where the most amount of Space Marine build, crafting, and customization will come from. Each mission is a side mission that Titus tasks other squads with doing during the campaign. Good example is taking down a Tyranid Hive Tyrant to shatter swarm cohesion, or blowing up a Promethean refinery to slow them down. In this, you pick between 6 classes, which are all technically characters of their own, and go through these missions doing the various objectives. Complete it and you earn experience and these gold coin currency things you use to level up your character. I'm sure they have a name, but I'm calling them gold coins. Now, these missions have 4 difficulty levels, and playing them rewards you with stuff based on those levels specifically, including more armory data, more experience, and more coins. What I find the most fascinating about this whole system is that the leveling for the game is not selective in its build crafting, but rather very linear. Sure, you go ahead and pick which perk out of 3 in each column, but weapons are complete and immediate upgrades every time. You use a weapon a certain amount, master it, get a point to put in its perk tree, and then using the armory data can get a better version of that weapon. It's not, this gun has certain perks that do better with my build. It's literally, this gun does straight up more damage, or has less recoil, or more ammo capacity. And as you level them up, the perks continue to give you more of that. Some of the perks are just pure flat damage upgrades, so you soon realize that the higher difficulties are harder because yes, enemies have more health and do more damage, but you'll also be doing more damage as well. So the progression is generally straightforward. This isn't something like Darktide, where the higher difficulties require a level of fancy weapons to loot, build crafting specifics, and really hyper-focused gameplay. Starting off the co-op at the lowest level is what you're supposed to do. It's not a sign of being a scrub, that's just the point. And then you earn your way up through linear forms of power. And for the most part, it's a good time, but it's a good time if you have people to play with. There is, of course, matchmaking for the missions, but I think this game is the best when you can shoot the ship and do this in the background. It's a very relaxed game. You fight and kill and revel in the gore, but even at the highest levels, you don't need to lock in that hard. A little bit, but nothing astronomical. As far as the missions go, they vary in quality a decent amount. What they are missing more than anything is more actionable items, more things to do in general. The best mission to me by a country mile is the Helldrake mission because there are multiple mechanics. Dodging flame by going house to house, or building to building, often fighting a Thousand Suns Hellbrute, and then a little raid mechanic at the end to kill the Helldrake. It actually has decent player input and it's a blast. Beneath that is the Hive Tyrant mission, because fighting the Hive Tyrant actually makes me need to lock in at times, and the rest of the mission is pretty decent too. But outside of that, the rest is rather generic and samey. Nothing really stands out as being bad, but nothing really stands out as being good either. The issues start to show their head though when it comes to progression itself. Now, I imagine for a ton of people, the draw for this game is to make your own Space Marine to mess around with. Salamanders, Raven Guard, White Scars, Dark Angels, all of those people hyped to build their own special Space Marine and trudge around the map with them, killing enemies of humanity. Now, let's say you want to be a White Scar, even though you don't have a motorcycle, which does blow. Well, you can navigate to the White Scar emblem, click it, and then realize in order to get all the parts for that, you need to unlock individual bits bits first before you can get the rest. Emblem first, then color, and then the rest one after the other. This is the way it is for everything. You have to unlock the Iron Hands emblem before you unlock the Iron Hands color, so on and so forth, which is a bit annoying at first, but it gets more annoying when you realize this is the exact same gold coin currency you use for leveling up your character and getting them new perks and weapons. So the same currency to increase your power also increases your customization. When you level up at the speed that you do, spending money on cosmetics will directly slow down how good your characters play, therefore slow down your ability to progress through the difficulties. So you have to choose, get stronger or fashion. In every game, fashion is a side upgrade to levels or something natural. You don't have to pick, so if you really want to have the colors and scheme of certain chapters, you will fall behind your friends when it comes to power. Or you can become super powerful, but then you look like a basic bitch blueberry for the entire game. Now, some cosmetics are unlocked just from playing, specifically the armor parts, but why not just do that for all cosmetics? Why is it only the one type, and why is that locked specifically behind the class? It's a weird system, but that's not quite it. Another obvious problem is that when you earn in these co-op missions, the rewards for beating a mission are the same for them all. There is no special thing for special missions, which, if you know how gamers are, will lead them to finding the fastest possible mission and grinding only that one out, because choosing quick match, aka random, does not reward you with increased experience or loot, because there's no reason to do random when you can just spam the quickest one. It's in fact so obvious that when I streamed the game on the embargo date, before the public could even play, I got matched with two people who were already almost max level with less than a week of game time. They specifically helped carry me through the first mission, called Inferno, on the hardest difficulty because it was the easiest and rewards 4 times the experience that a regular difficulty one did, blasting my levels up to the highest possible amount. The game was not even out yet, and people already found the best way to grind it. So while the co-op PvE stuff is pretty fun and has a lot of good merit, there is definitely issues presented with it that need some adjustments. Between the mixed currency and the lack of random mission rewards, it's definitely going to become a bit of a slog to get through unless it's fixed soon. Which is a very funny thing to say, because the final mode of the game, the PvP, definitely has its problems, but I have strangely different feelings about it. The PvP of this game fucking rules. It's so funny to say that the way I am saying it right now, because it's clearly unfinished and it feels extremely tacked on, but it is so much fun. When I say tacked on, I don't mean actually tacked on at the last minute. Like, the first game is PvP 2, and so it was also surprisingly good, and I imagine that this game was planning on PvP, clearly. But this was just a complete shock to me. I uploaded an initial feelings video to my second channel when the embargo first lifted, and my experience was mostly based around the campaign and the PvE co-op stuff. So, like with what you saw above, it wasn't the most glowing of reviews. But this PvP, man, there's just something about it. The function of this is very simple. It's a 6v6 mode with 3 game modes. These are the classic takes on team deathmatch, domination, and hardpoint / king of the hill. In your team of 6, you play as either the loyalist or the heretic Astartes, and you can only have 2 of each class at a time, so no 6-man stack of heavies or tacticals, for example. From there, you go out and murder each other, and it is a meaty, thick, glorious time. The gameplay for the PvP is so weirdly in-depth and impressive while still clearly being unfinished. It's bringing me back to the days of Mass Effect 3 PvP, which is a very good sign. The time to kill in this game is about the same as something like Halo, sometimes a little faster, sometimes a little slower, depending on the class, weapon, etc. But much like in the campaign, you have armor and health, though in multiplayer, both get regenerated at different rates. But the cool balancing act here is that guns damage armor, and of course, when you're out of it, you take health damage, but melee ignores ignores armor completely and does nothing but health damage. So if you want to bypass the shenanigans of gun combat and just go for the throat, you are rewarded for doing so, especially because health regenerates at a significantly slower speed compared to armor. This is awesome because it means if you take some gunfire and then escape, it's relatively harmless. You can just heal your armor up and be done. But if you survive a major battle and take a bunch of health damage, you got to be a bit more careful with what you do and let that shit roll back up. This is compounded by the fact that each class has a dedicated strength and weakness that is actually balanced in a way I never expected. Each time I thought a class would be the strong OP one, I changed my mind immediately and it was quite the experience. Example. Heavy is nasty with its heavy bolter, and with the iron halo blocking projectiles, it's a seriously tough nut to crack, even more so with their 4 armor pips. I was crushing people with the heavy, and nobody could handle the amount of firepower I was putting out. And then I said to myself, okay, heavy is clearly going to be OP. So let me get ahead of the curve and find a character to beat them with. I realized that the Bulwark, while sprinting and holding the shield up, blocks all range damage in its totality. So when I saw a heavy, I just sprinted at them and beat the shit out of them because heavy has no melee weapons and I bypassed their 4 armor pips with melee. In fact, combine that with the flag that you use to regen your armor and I was thinking, holy crap. The Bulwark is unassailable. This is an insanely good class, and I can do tons of team play things with this. I can block bullets or even block melee attacks and have my team kill them for me. And if the heavy shooting at me decides to stop and attack somebody else, I can easily just whip out the Glock and shoot them dead or cleave them in 2. So I said to myself, holy crap. The Bulwark is clearly the OP class. I gotta find a way to beat them. So I see the Vanguard with their grapple hook, and it can stun enemies it grapples, which is really nasty because then you get in close and melee or shoot them to death. But what's special is that while a Bulwark is blocking you, you can do the grab and it knocks them out of their blocking ability, opening them up and allowing your team to kill them. Soon I found also that in PvP, the grapple doesn't have to only hit enemies and it can be used for traversal. And that opened up a massive amount of new ideas and opportunities to be had, bouncing all around the map and doing flanks. Soon, I was a menace with the Vanguard and all of its speed. This went round and round we go. Every class had some kind of power to it. Snipers are clearly a PvP-centered class, but I'm a bad sniper, so I didn't think it was that good until I unlocked the SMG bolt carbine and went a cloak and dagger route. The invisibility is nearly complete, so just popping it and walking behind people like a gremlin and mag dumping them in the back of the head was so satisfying and probably infuriating for the enemy team. Hey. Do. Hey!
My grenade didn't go off in time. Cav, hold on to him. I'm gonna throw a grenade. Push up, push up.
The tactical aspects is very good, giving tons of information, but also allowing see-through walls for a period of time, which in a third-person shooter is a massive advantage. Plus, they are the one with the most straightforward gun, so with the exception of the heavy, they will almost always win a 1v1 gunfight, meaning you gotta play around them. The only class I felt was lacking was the assault class. Live Bricky addendum of the script. I thought that's originally, and then I forgot the golden rule of video game development. Gamers don't look up. Turns out, the assault can be really good if you fly up and hold yourself in the air around a corner, smooth your way out, throw a grenade, pistol whip a couple guys, and then slam. They stop looking up. Nobody looks up, and then you just arrive in their asshole. So maybe the assault is good. I don't know. But yeah, the PvP kind of slaps in a way I just wasn't expecting. I love this stuff so very much, and I didn't think I would. Which leads me to the issues. You level up in this in a more linear way, just unlocking items for classes with each level. And I like that. It's simple and easy to do and leaves you with a lot of gold coins that you can spend on just cosmetics because there's no perks or talent trees. It's a much better leveling experience that way. The downside is that, like I mentioned before, this shit is just so underbaked. The gameplay part is good, but there was not enough time for the rest to get going. For starters, there is only 3 game modes: Domination, King of the Hill, and TDM. The original game had Capture the Flag, which is, I believe, sorely missed. And 3 game modes, it's pretty small. It's not the worst thing, but it's low. What's crazier is that there are only 3 maps, 3 total maps in the entire PvP roster. That is a wildly small amount of options here. But the biggest thing, and the one that stings the most, is that there is 0 Heretic Astartes customization. Each class is linked to a legion, and all you can do is paint them different colors. No Night Lord Bulwarks, no Iron Warriors Tacticals. If you want to be Night Lords, you have to be Assault. World Eaters have to be Vanguard, and so on. Which stings, but I get, but stings. Because if you're doing that because silhouettes, okay, you need to know that that's a World Eater, that means they're Vanguard, that's a Night Lord, that means they're Assault. That's fine from a player versus player perspective. You need proper silhouettes. But that doesn't mean there couldn't have at least been armor customization for them. I'm fine if the Night Lords are the only ones that can be Assault, but I would have liked some other Night Lord customization. You gave me a Night Lord Assault jump pack and you didn't give me a skin cape? Where's my skin? I can't see anything without my skin. The World Eater Vanguard uses the same combat knife as the rest, but I mean, could we not have given them a skin for like a chain axe? It's a World Eater without a chain axe. There's a lot of this stuff that just kind of stings a little bit. Like, I don't need a ton, but just a couple helmet options and things like that for the classes would have been really nice. Besides that, the Loyalists get all the customization, and that really blows, especially considering that you play as one or the other for 50% of all PvP games. And it also triply sucks because the Heretics actually have their own voice lines based on their Legion, and they sound cool as shit.
Marauders of Abaddon, back to war!
Darkness claims an ally.
Closing in for the kill! One of ours goes to rot.
The Alpha Legion lives, dies, and is reborn as one.
Iron endures all.
The game is littered with things that clearly show it was not done and ready for release. This is the 3rd major Warhammer game in a row that was so obviously underbaked and not ready for launch. Darktide, Rogue Trader, and now Space Marine 2. I don't know if it's a GW thing. I don't know if it's a game industry thing. Probably a bit of both, but wow. 3 modes, 3 maps, no Heretic customization. You can't even find out what the game modes are. You mouse over them on the menu and it just tells you their name. You don't even know what they do. You can extrapolate some data, but that's an entire tooltip missing. And oh my god, the voice lines of the announcers. Are you kidding me?
Objective, 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 objective. Servants of the corpse, God claims the objective.
All this together, I do truly wonder how it will look in a year's time. I hate that I have to say this again so damn often, but despite it being as fun as it is, it clearly was not ready, and maybe it will resemble something more like a completed product in a bit. But during that time, well, don't forget to buy the season pass with all the cosmetic options and new things. Yahoo! That's still out for you. There are some things that a delay wouldn't have fixed. The lackluster story is doomed no matter what. But a lot of those other things, like the forcing you into a game when you swap modes, at least at first, but then apparently if you swap modes and then back out, that's the way to go into the mode. It's kind of weird. The lack of a random bonus for co-op mission choices, the lack of PvP map modes and customization, so much of it could have been improved on if this had just a few more months to cook, which is unfortunate because I really do like playing the game. By the time of this video being out, I should have probably more than 50 hours of game time already. I'm at like over 40, and I'm sure it'll be there by this entire video's release. Clearly, with my criticisms, I still consider it an enjoyable product worth playing, but that's the entire part of reviewing something. I need to be fair and honest about all my feelings, despite my bias one way or another, and despite the fact that I was given a copy of this game for free. Space Marine 2 is a good game, but it is not Game of the Year. It was not ready to launch yet. It is a 2011 video game, much like its original, with every good and bad bit that comes along with that statement. Whether or not you find this to be a fantastic product is entirely based around what you want to get out of the game. If you are a die-hard 40K fan and you want a modern Space Marine simulator and dress-up game, then goddammit, this is a huge recommendation, and you should definitely buy it if you haven't already. This might actually be your game of the year. If you are a Warhammer fan that is still looking for a good experience, but know that, well, Warhammer games are normally a bit mid, you'll like this too, because it's better than just a bit mid. But if you are hoping for the next game to really put us on the map and really show the true quality that this universe can provide when it comes to story and just general packages, then you gotta wait for the next one. I'm hoping at minimum the sales numbers for it are going to be very high, and that alone means it will continue to get tons of support and new projects will come about. If that's the takeaway from this very okay game, I'm fine with that. I'm definitely gonna play the PvP a ton at minimum because that shit rules, but I'm curious as to what this will look like in 6 to 12 months. Maybe I'll come back and talk to you about it again. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. I know I can come off as a real nitpicky asshole, but I don't think that just because the average Warhammer game kinda sucks means I should put this on a pedestal for being better than that. I try to rate all products on the same scale, and for me, it's trying its best, because a game needs to be rated based on its price point very often. Hopefully next game we can play as Chaos. That'd be fun. Titus is the main villain. Ooh, you play as a word bearer. I mean, hell, the Chaos books show me how important the narrative aspect is. You can have big, crazy dude in armor still have a very interesting character. Look at Argel Tal, Karn, Aramin, Fabius Bile, my god. So wanting that, I think, is still fair. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to check out the Gamer Subs while you have the opportunity. Code Bricky in the description. Use it while you can. Pick up Sweet Six Pack and the other awesome flavors. And then when that's all done and done, it still will be there. So, you know, check it out. Thank you again. And Ave Dominus Nox. The Emperor betrayed us all.